Welcome back, everyone, to another day in the shop. Just coming out here to stoke up the wood. Bubba, what are you welding?
Practicing my welding.
With a sparkler?
Yeah. I got about 10 of them left, though. Maybe that's why I ain't laying the bead.
I guess he's still bringing in the new year. You know, there's all kind of jigs and devices out there to sharpen drill bits, but you can never find one to sharpen these real tiny bits like this 5/64, even smaller. I attempt to sharpen them, and sometimes I get it just right, and sometimes it's not good at all. But I broke 2 or 3 5/64 bits and broke another one since the last video. Got some more on the way, they're just not here yet, so I go and attempt to sharpen them. So I'm going to get this one in here. I'm working on frame locks and drilling out tap sizes for the frames. Right now I'm drilling through the back spacers. And got to see if I can get this one done. Well, I got them all drilled out, but I don't think I'm going to get a cigar. It's just hard to see to get the faces right and the rake right on a 5/64 bit or something smaller. Like I said, I get them right sometimes. Sometimes I don't. That one half cut. So now what I need to do is go ahead and drill these out to let a 256 screw pass through and do the counter bores. And I realized something when I was looking for my counter bore for my 256 screws. In the last video, I drilled these out, but if you remember in the frame lock series that I did, detail series, I did a hidden stop pin design. Well, I can't do this on these because I drilled out both of the frames. What I normally do is use a small bit, drill through and mark the other frame, take them apart, and then counter bore each side and put the pin inside there. You'll just have a little hole on the lock side. Well, now I've got to do a full pass-through stop pin design like I used to do them, but it's no problem, but it means I'll have to counter bore each side of the stop pin to accept a 256 screw that I'll be using a 1/8 pivot pin for a stop pin. So that means I'll be using like a .166 end mill to countersink those, just not using my head. So I get those pass-through holes done, set up on the mill, and start doing the counter bores. Right about now is when you want to make sure you've got your scales marked on which one's outside or inside. So I'll go ahead and write them. You don't want to counter bore them on the wrong side. Ask me how I know. All right, got all the counter boring done. I even did the pivot area that I explained earlier about. It's a 1/8 hole, so I had to do a method of lining up an end mill and cutting that pocket for the 256 head button head screw. Now there's a couple ways to do that. There's the tried and true method. If you're doing all this manual, CNC, you don't have to worry about it, but you got to lock it down in your vise, line it up with a line-up pin. You can use your DRO, but you line it up, take that line-up out, and mill it out with an end mill. You plunge cut it. A quicker, faster way is I take it over to My drill, I stick in a masonry bit that has like an 85 or 82 degree, whatever it is, carbide tipped masonry bit. And I slightly cut the hole there because it's going to center. It will center itself. And then I take it over and plunge cut with the end mill, because the end mill is going to find that bevel left by the masonry bit and it'll center itself. And then I go ahead and plunge cut it. And you don't want to try to do this freehand unless you've got a place for that end mill to go. For one, you won't get it lined up straight, and two, it'll walk around. You could damage your part, or worse, hurt yourself. And we don't want to do that. Now, I still have to cut the bearing pockets and the pivot head pocket. A lot left to do, but I've got all of that done. And now I'm going to go ahead and thread the back spacers. I was reading comments a while ago. I get these a lot. A lot of people ask me, if I've been on Forged in Fire, or will I ever go on Forged in Fire? And it's just not something I'm interested in. The producers wrote me about 3 or 4 years ago and asked me to apply to the show. I wrote back to them back and forth a couple times, but the main reason why I don't, and for one, I'm not really interested. And if you know my background, I worked in the film industry quite a while. I wrote, produced, and directed 2 feature-length films, and I worked in a lot of films produced and directed out of Hollywood. I worked in different capacities, even as an actor. You can go to imdb.com and look all that up. So I'm not interested in being on TV. But the thing of it is, in any production, television, reality show, whatever, the cast and crew always get paid, everybody, down to an extra. The only people that get paid on Forged in Fire is the winner and the rest of the people. All the other contestants, you just get a free ride to the hotel and your hotel stay and all that stuff. I mean, I can't take off 3 weeks to, go work on something without getting paid. And like I said, in any production, especially SAG production, that's a Screen Actors Guild, you always get paid down to the delivery guy. I mean, everybody gets paid, extras, cast, and crew. And when I confronted them about that, well, no, we don't do that. Well, I'm not going to work on your show for free to make you money, and the exposure is not worth it. It's not going to make you famous. I don't want to be famous, for one. They don't push your name, none of that after the fact. They mention you one time when they introduce you to the show, and that's it. As far as down the line, you're just expendable. You're nobody. I'm no longer active in the film and television industry, but I've got a son that still is. But I backed out of the industry for a reason. I got in it for the creative aspect. I've been fooling with filmmaking all my life, as long as I've been making knives. So I still love it. It's the art side of it. I could care less about fame. So none of that was enticing to me. And if I'm going to do it, I want to get paid. So I hope that clears up some questions about it. I don't have anything against anybody that goes on the show. I got many friends that have been on the show and won. My good buddy J.W. Randall won it twice. Lots of friends. I don't care. It's just not for me. And unless you win, you lose. And I mean, you don't get paid. But if you just something you want to do for fun or whatever, but that's fine. But it's not going to benefit you other than if you win, and it's just going to be the money. I mean, winning the show doesn't mean anything either, in my opinion. But anyway, that's why, I don't care about going on the show. Back to knife making. This is my little tapping jig. I get these all tapped, and you don't have to use this. You can take a drill and do it by hand, but on this thick stuff, I don't risk it. I've broke enough taps to know better. And so I just take my time. I use a thread forming tap, and it doesn't cut, it pushes. All right, I get all these done. All right, so I've got all the stop pin tracks cut in these stainless knives. I've already got the Damascus clip point cut and heat treated. I did that in a couple videos back when I heat treated the drop point. So now I'm gonna stick these in the oven, but I've also got to surface grind the back spacer for the Damascus knife. It's about 47 thousandths too thick. So I'm gonna cut it down, put it back in the frame and profile it to shape. And I'll do that when I get these all done, do them at the same time. And I'll heat treat the back spacer because I want it to match the blade. If you remember, I didn't heat treat the bolsters in a couple videos back on the drop point because I wanted that Damascus to contrast with the blade Damascus. You know, a lot of people say you don't have to heat treat. You don't. You don't have to heat treat bolsters and guards and back spacers. But in my experience, it shows up differently. And you can see in that drop point the difference between the bolsters and the blade. The bolsters not being heat treated and the blade being heat treated and tempered. There's a difference. My controller throwed an error code 5, which is supposed to mean a thermocouple issue, connection or whatever. This one's been in here a long time. So fortunately, I have a spare. I usually have a couple spares, but I gotta let it cool down, see if I can get this one out and change it out. And if it's not that, I'll move on to controller or one of the SSRs. It's got 2 SSRs in it. And I've got one spare and hopefully get that resolved. Like they say, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Just another day in the shop. I'm going to try to take these wires loose without taking the controller out, because that can be a pain, but it's also a pain trying to do it without taking them out. Now the replacement that I have here is a dual thermocouple. I'm only going to be using one of the sensors though. I hope that this old thermocouple is good. That's why I've rolled the other one up here out of the way. If not, I'll have to order a replacement. That's just all it is to it. I really need to upgrade my heat oven. It's old. My dad built this for me when I was a young man getting started into this. Got to make sure I can get this one in there without taking everything out of here. These are industrial thermocouples, and they're made out of like an Inconel, very hard, high temperature, durable stuff. So there's no ceramic jacket, so they will eventually wear out and get pretty damaged on the end, especially when you're heat treating high temperatures like stainless. Well, that's a good sign. No errors. Let's try her out, heat her up. We'll find out in a few minutes. And we're getting the error again. I don't know what's causing this. I think I've got a controller problem. I was trying to get it to just come up and hold like a 500-degree temp. It's not auto-tuning. So, Houston, we have a problem. I'm gonna check and see if I've got an old controller. I may. If we do, we're gonna stick it in there. All right, so I found a spare controller that I had, and it's not working right, which is probably why it's a spare. I've had several of these over the years. The best one I ever had was made by Omega, but these are cheap foreign controllers, $35. You can get these all day. The other one that I took out is a $300 one. It's an Omron, and it worked great for a very long time. This one here, I cannot get the set point above 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. It's set for Fahrenheit, and I go through all the menu items. It will not let me raise that set point. It's also about 30 degrees off on my thermocouple. It's not reading proper temperature, hence why it's a spare. So what I'm going to do is I'll just order a new one. I'm also going to replace the thermocouple I got in here with a ceramic coated thermocouple. So I'm going to drop back and work on a couple blades that are already heat treated, including the twist clip point blade, and wait for this controller to come in. Yep, just another day in the shop. So this is the twist Damascus blade that I made in the previous video, or 2 or 3 back, and it's already heat treated, so I can get back on it. What I was doing there was adjusting the stop and the end of the blade. I still have a lot of work to do. Cut the bearing pockets, the pivot head pockets, and cut the lock bar and all that stuff. Right now I just got some temporary stuff there to operate it. I went ahead and my backspacer's heat treated, and it is sized to the right width. So everything is dead on there. Also have this stainless liner lock that is heat treated as well, little drop point, and we'll finish it out. Got the lock bar to cut and do the scale work, grinding, all that fun stuff. But we're going to pick that up on the next video, and hopefully we'll have my oven ready to go. I hope you've enjoyed this another day in the shop style video, and I want to thank my patrons, and I want to thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one.